Your economics textbook tells you modern monetary theory began in Scotland. Adam Smith, 1776. The Wealth of Nations. The birth of economics as we know it. This is the story they want you to believe. The truth sits in manuscripts scattered across 3 continents, in libraries from Istanbul to Oxford, written in Arabic, dated to the year 1106 CE, 4 centuries before Smith picked up a pen. A Persian theologian named Abu Hamid al-Ghazali documented the same insights your professors attribute to Enlightenment Europeans. Money has no intrinsic value. Prices form through supply and demand. Hoarding currency destroys economies. Treating money as a commodity rather than a medium of exchange leads to societal collapse. Al-Ghazali wrote this in the 11th century, in a 40-volume work still preserved in its original form, with arguments so precise they read like modern economic papers. Adam Smith did not invent monetary theory, he inherited it, and the original architect has been erased from your education. This erasure was not accidental, it was structural. The machinery of Western academic economics required a European origin story, a creation myth placing rational economic thought within Enlightenment borders. Acknowledging a medieval Muslim theologian as the source would disrupt the entire infrastructure of intellectual authority the discipline had built. So the gatekeepers of economic history performed an extraction. They removed al-Ghazali from the lineage. They concentrated credit in European hands. They engineered a bottleneck in the flow of ideas, making it appear economic science emerged from nowhere in 18th century Scotland. The incentives aligned perfectly for this suppression. Colonial powers needed to justify their dominance. Religious institutions needed to claim moral authority over commerce. Universities needed to maintain leverage over what counted as legitimate knowledge. Al-Ghazali threatened all 3. His framework proved non-European. Non-Christian societies had developed sophisticated economic analysis centuries earlier. His integration of ethics with economics challenged the separation Western thinkers would later impose. His work demonstrated the Islamic Golden Age produced insights the West was only beginning to grasp. So they made him disappear from your curriculum. Welcome to Noob Historian. Behind every headline in your history book, there's a ledger they kept hidden. We open it. You live inside al-Ghazali's framework right now. Every time you use paper currency, backed by nothing but social trust. You operate within a system he described 900 years ago. Every time you hear debates about whether the Federal Reserve should print more money, you hear echoes of arguments he documented in medieval Persia. Every time Islamic banks process transactions worth billions of dollars using profit sharing instead of interest, they cite his name in their founding documents. A $4 trillion industry runs on principles he established. Environmental, social, and governance investing, a movement now exceeding $30 trillion globally, resurrects his core argument. Economic activity cannot be separated from moral evaluation. Critiques of financialization filling bestseller lists. Today, repeat warnings he issued before the First Crusade. Your wallet, your mortgage, your retirement account. The entire architecture of modern finance traces back to debates this one thinker either started or anticipated, and you have never heard his name? Until now. Abu Hamid Muhammad ibn Muhammad al-Ghazali entered the world in 1058 CE in Tus, a city in northeastern Persia, near modern-day Mashhad, Iran. His father sold wool in the local market. The family had modest means. His father died while al-Ghazali and his brother Ahmad were still young boys. Before his death, the father entrusted both sons to a Sufi friend, asking him to ensure they received education. This decision altered the trajectory of Islamic intellectual history. Al-Ghazali proved exceptional from the start. He studied in Tus, then moved to Jurgen for advanced learning. By his early 20s, he had traveled to Nishapur, the premier intellectual center of the Eastern Islamic world, to study under al-Juwayni, the most celebrated theologian of the age. Al-Juwayni recognized his students' extraordinary abilities. He called al-Ghazali a deep ocean of knowledge. When al-Juwayni died in 1085, al-Ghazali's reputation had grown substantial enough to attract the attention of Nizam al-Mulk, the vizier of the Seljuk Empire. Nizam al-Mulk served as the primary administrator for an empire stretching from Central Asia to the Mediterranean. He collected scholars the way other administrators collected taxes. Al-Ghazali became part of his intellectual court. In 1091, Nizam al-Mulk appointed al-Ghazali to the most prestigious academic position in the Islamic world, professor at the Nizamiya Madrasa in Baghdad. He was 33 years old. He had reached the peak of academic achievement. Students flocked to his lectures by the hundreds. His legal opinions carried weight across the empire. He debated philosophers, refuted heretics, and produced texts on logic, theology, and law with astonishing speed. Then something broke inside him. In 1095, al-Ghazali experienced a profound spiritual and psychological crisis. He lost the ability to speak. He could not eat. He could not teach. Physicians examined him and found no physical cause. The affliction, as he later described it, was internal. He had spent years defending religious truth through rational argument, yet he had lost personal connection to the truth he defended. He was intellectually successful and spiritually empty. He abandoned everything. He left his prestigious position, his students, his income, his reputation. He gave away his wealth. He told people he was going on pilgrimage to Mecca. Instead, he began a decade of wandering, solitude, and mystical practice. He traveled to Damascus and spent 2 years in spiritual retreat. He visited Jerusalem before the Crusaders arrived to destroy it. He performed the pilgrimage to Mecca and Medina. He returned to Tus and lived in seclusion, practicing Sufi devotional exercises, studying his own soul, writing. During this decade of withdrawal, he produced his masterwork, Ihya Ulum al-Din, the revival of the religious sciences, 40 volumes covering every aspect of Islamic life: prayer, charity, marriage, death, business ethics, the nature of the soul, the structure of knowledge, the dangers of wealth, the proper use of money. This last subject occupied more of his attention than most readers expected from a theologian. Al-Ghazali understood something his contemporaries often missed. Religion could not be separated from economics. How people earned, spent, saved, and circulated wealth shaped their spiritual condition. An economy structured around greed produced spiritually diseased populations. An economy structured around justice and circulation produced healthier souls. His economic analysis emerged from this insight. He was not writing as an economist in the modern sense. He was writing as a moral physician diagnosing social illness, and his diagnosis proved so precise it would anticipate professional economic theory by centuries. He returned briefly to teaching in 1106, taking a position at the Nizamiya in Nishapur, but he taught for only a few years before retiring again to Tus. He died there in December 1111 at the age of 53. He left behind more than 70 works, a transformed understanding of Islamic spirituality, a synthesis of law, philosophy, and mysticism still studied today, and an economic framework buried within his theological writings, waiting 9 centuries for the world to catch up. Open Book 13 of the Ihya Ulum al-Din. The title translates to The Book of the Etiquette of Acquisition and Earning a Livelihood. Within its pages, al-Ghazali constructed an economic theory of startling sophistication. He began with first principles. What is money? Why does it exist? What purpose does it serve? His answer demolished assumptions most people hold today. Money, al-Ghazali argued, has no value in itself. You cannot eat gold. You cannot wear silver. You cannot build shelter from coins. Money exists only because human beings agree it exists. It serves as a measure and medium of exchange, allowing people to trade goods of different types and quantities. Without money, a farmer with grain who needs cloth must find a weaver who needs grain. With money, the farmer sells grain to anyone, then uses the money to buy cloth from anyone else. Al-Ghazali described money as a mirror. A mirror reflects other objects but has no color of its own. Money reflects the value of other goods but has no value of its own. A mirror is useless if you lock it in a dark room. Money is useless if you lock it in a vault. He described money as a judge. A judge arbitrates between disputing parties, enabling resolution. Money arbitrates between goods of different types, enabling exchange. A judge who accepts bribes and ceases judging corrupts the entire legal system. Money removed from circulation and hoarded for its own sake corrupts the entire economic system. This framework generated his most famous economic argument, the condemnation of hoarding. When someone accumulates money and refuses to spend or invest it, al-Ghazali argued, they imprison the judge. They remove money from its intended social function. They break the machinery of exchange. Other people who need money to conduct legitimate transactions find less available. Prices distort, trade slows, the economy suffers. Al-Ghazali extended this logic to the prohibition of riba, commonly translated as interest or usury. His argument did not rest on arbitrary religious command. It rested on the nature of money itself. If money has no intrinsic value, he reasoned, it cannot grow on its own. When you lend money and demand more money in return purely for the passage of time, you treat money as if it were a productive asset. You pretend money gives birth to more money, but money cannot reproduce. Only real economic activity creates value. A farmer plants seeds and harvests grain. A craftsman transforms raw materials into finished goods. A merchant transports products from where they are abundant to where they are scarce. Money does none of these things. Money measures and facilitates. When you charge interest, you insert yourself as an extractor between productive activities, claiming a portion of value you did not create. You convert the measuring tool into the thing measured. You transform the judge into a party to the dispute. This corruption, al-Ghazali warned, spreads through society. Once people realize they can profit from money itself rather than productive work, incentives shift. Talented individuals abandon farming, craft, and trade for pure financial manipulation. Capital flows toward extraction rather than creation. The economy becomes a mechanism for concentrating wealth rather than generating it. He wrote this in the 11th century. He described financialization before the word existed. Al-Ghazali then turned to market dynamics. He observed supply and demand in the bazaars of Baghdad and Nishapur and documented their effects on price formation. When goods are scarce, prices rise. When goods are abundant, prices fall. Merchants who understand these patterns profit through arbitrage, buying where prices are low and selling where prices are high. He did not condemn this activity. Spatial arbitrage, moving goods from regions of surplus to regions of scarcity, performed a genuine social service. It allocated resources efficiently. It rewarded merchants for solving logistical problems. It benefited both buyers who gained access to needed goods and sellers who reached larger markets. But temporal arbitrage through money lending differed fundamentally. The lender moved nothing, created nothing, solved no logistical problem. The lender simply exploited the borrower's need for present money over future money, extracting value without adding value. Al-Ghazali's framework also classified economic activities by moral status. Some occupations he deemed obligatory for society: farming, weaving, construction, medicine. Without these, civilization collapses. Some occupations he deemed permissible but dangerous: trade and luxuries, moneylending. These tempted practitioners toward greed and exploitation. Some occupations he deemed forbidden: fraud, theft, the sale of harmful goods, the manufacture of instruments of sin. This classification system anticipated environmental, social, and governance investing by 9 centuries. Modern ESG funds screen companies based on their social impact, excluding weapons manufacturers, polluters, and exploitative industries, while favoring sustainable and beneficial enterprises. Al-Ghazali developed the same screening methodology in 1106. The depth of his economic thought has stunned modern scholars. Professor S.M. Ghazanfar, writing in Medieval Islamic Economic Thought, documented parallel after parallel between Al-Ghazali's arguments and those appearing in Adam Smith, John Maynard Keynes, and contemporary economists. Abdul Azim Islahi, working through the Islamic Economics Institute, traced specific concepts from Al-Ghazali's texts to later European formulations. The transmission routes existed. Al-Ghazali's work spread throughout the Islamic world during his lifetime. After his death, they traveled through Andalusia, Islamic Spain, where Christian, Muslim, and Jewish scholars worked side by side, translating Arabic texts into Latin. The Mediterranean trade networks carried ideas along with goods. Scholastic philosophers, including Thomas Aquinas, addressed economic questions using frameworks remarkably similar to Al-Ghazali's. Direct influence remains debated among historians. The textual parallels are documented. The transmission infrastructure existed. Whether European economists read Al-Ghazali directly, encountered his ideas through intermediaries, or independently reached similar conclusions through similar reasoning continues as an active scholarly question. What is not debated is priority. Al-Ghazali published first, centuries first. Ideas spread through networks. In the medieval world, networks meant trade routes, pilgrimage paths, and scholarly circles. Al-Ghazali's economic framework traveled all three. The Ihya Ulum al-Din became a phenomenon within decades of its completion. Scholars copied it by hand in every major center of Islamic learning. Merchants carried copies along the Silk Road. Pilgrims brought volumes back from Mecca. Students memorized passages and transmitted them orally. By the 12th century, the Ihya existed in manuscript form across North Africa, the Levant, Persia, Central Asia, and Andalusia. The Suleymaniya Library in Istanbul today holds multiple early manuscripts. Cairo's Dar al-Kutub maintains copies dating back centuries. Oxford's Bodleian Library acquired Arabic manuscripts through colonial and scholarly channels, preserving texts their original libraries could no longer protect. The Persian translation proved equally significant. Al-Ghazali himself wrote Kimya-i Sa'adat, The Alchemy of Happiness, as a condensed Persian version of his Arabic masterwork. Persian served as the language of commerce and culture across a vast territory from Anatolia to Bengal. Merchants who might never master scholarly Arabic could access his economic arguments in their trading language. Al-Ghazali also produced Al-Tibr al-Masbuk fi Nasihat al-Muluk, a political economy treatise addressed to rulers. This text moved beyond theoretical framework into practical application. It advised kings on taxation, market regulation, and monetary policy. It circulated among administrators across the Islamic world, shaping governance for centuries. The route into European thought ran through Andalusia. Islamic Spain maintained the most advanced civilization in medieval Europe. Cordoba's libraries held more books than all other European libraries combined. Toledo became a translation factory after its conquest by Christian forces in 1085, with scholars systematically converting Arabic, scientific, philosophical, and medical texts into Latin. The Toledo School of Translators operated for over a century. Teams of scholars, often including Arabic-speaking Jews who served as intermediaries, produced Latin versions of Aristotle, Avicenna, Averroes, and dozens of other Arabic authors. These translations transformed European intellectual life. The Renaissance and the scientific revolution drew on knowledge transmitted through this channel. Economic ideas traveled alongside philosophical ones. European scholastic thinkers, including Thomas Aquinas, engaged deeply with questions of just price, usury, and market ethics. Their frameworks bore striking resemblance to Islamic predecessors. The prohibition of usury in medieval Christian Europe mirrored the prohibition of riba in Islamic law. The concept of just price, praedium justum, paralleled Islamic market ethics. Whether these similarities resulted from direct transmission, common inheritance from ancient sources, or independent reasoning remains contested. The infrastructure for transmission clearly existed. The timing aligned, the conceptual parallels are documented. What is clear is the Islamic world developed these frameworks first. Al-Ghazali synthesized and systematized economic ethics before European thinkers addressed the questions. His manuscripts predate scholastic economics by generations. His analysis achieved a sophistication European thought would not match for centuries. The suppression of this priority occurred gradually, then completely. As European colonial powers expanded, they rewrote intellectual history to center themselves. Economics became a European science invented by European men. The contributions of Islamic thinkers were minimized, dismissed, or erased entirely. Textbooks traced economic thought from ancient Greece to medieval darkness to Enlightenment brilliance, skipping the Islamic Golden Age as if it never produced ideas worth preserving. This erasure served colonial ideologies. If Islamic civilization had contributed nothing of intellectual value, colonizing Islamic lands required no apology. If economic science was a European invention, European economic dominance seemed natural rather than constructed. The manuscripts survived. The ideas persisted. But for generations, Western students of economics learned nothing of al-Ghazali. They learned Smith discovered what al-Ghazali had published 670 years earlier. The recovery began in the 20th century. Muslim scholars seeking to develop Islamic economics independent of Western models returned to primary sources. They found al-Ghazali waiting. His framework needed no translation into Islamic terms because it had never left them. His integration of ethics with economics provided exactly what modern Islamic finance required. Western academics followed, though more slowly. Comparative economic historians began documenting the Islamic contributions their discipline had ignored. The scholarship of Ghazanfar, Islahi, and others brought al-Ghazali's economic thought to English-speaking audiences. The evidence proved too substantial to dismiss. Today, anyone with access to a university library can read al-Ghazali's economic arguments in translation. The manuscripts exist. The translations exist. The scholarly analysis exists. The priority is documented. The only thing lacking is public awareness. Until channels like this one do the work, your education failed to complete. Islamic finance operates as a parallel financial system, serving nearly 2 billion people worldwide. Its total assets exceed $4 trillion. Its growth rate outpaces conventional finance in most markets. Its founding principles trace directly to al-Ghazali. When Islamic Development Bank opened in 1975, its architects faced a fundamental challenge. How do you build a modern bank without interest? Interest formed the basis of conventional banking. Banks pay interest on deposits to attract money. Banks charge interest on loans to make profit. Remove interest, and the entire model collapses. Al-Ghazali's framework provided the answer. If money cannot legitimately give birth to more money, profit must come from real economic activity. Instead of lending money at interest, Islamic banks invest in actual projects and share the profits or losses with their partners. Instead of paying interest on deposits, they share investment returns with depositors. The bank becomes a partner in enterprise, rather than a pure extractor of value. Mudraba structures follow this model. One party provides capital. The other party provides expertise and labor. Profits are shared according to a predetermined ratio. Losses fall on the capital provider, since the labor provider has already lost their time and effort. Both parties have genuine stakes in the success of the enterprise. Musharaka structures go further. Both parties contribute capital and share management responsibility. Profits and losses are distributed according to capital contribution. This creates joint ventures rather than debtor-creditor relationships. Ijara structures address equipment and property finance. Instead of lending money to buy a car or building, the Islamic bank purchases the asset itself, then leases it to the client. The bank owns the asset and bears ownership risk. The client pays rent for use. At the end of the lease, ownership transfers to the client. This differs from conventional finance by keeping the bank genuinely invested in the underlying asset. Sukuk Islamic bonds work similarly. Instead of lending money and receiving interest, Sukuk investors buy shares in actual assets. A Sukuk might represent partial ownership of a highway, a hospital, or an industrial facility. The investors receive returns based on the asset's actual performance, not a guaranteed interest rate. This ties financial returns to real economic activity. Every one of these structures addresses al-Ghazali's core concern. Money must facilitate productive activity, not extract from it. Financial returns must come from genuine value creation, not pure time preference. The machinery of finance must serve the economy, not dominate it. The industry has not achieved perfection. Critics within the Islamic finance community argue many structures have become form over substance, replicating conventional interest under different labels. The debate over whether modern sukuk truly comply with Islamic principles continues. Some products satisfy the letter of al-Ghazali's framework while violating its spirit. But the framework itself shapes the debate. Al-Ghazali's categories determine what counts as legitimate, what counts as problematic, and what counts as forbidden. His arguments from 9 centuries ago set the terms of 21st century financial disputes. His influence persists not as historical curiosity, but as living authority. Beyond Islamic finance proper, al-Ghazali's ideas resurface in the environmental, social, and governance movement, transforming conventional investing. ESG funds screen investments based on ethical criteria. They exclude weapons manufacturers, fossil fuel companies, and firms with poor labor practices. They favor renewable energy, sustainable agriculture, and companies with strong community relations. They attempt to direct capital toward activities that benefit society and away from activities that harm it. This is al-Ghazali's classification system in modern form. His categories of obligatory, permissible, dangerous, and forbidden economic activities map directly onto ESG screening criteria. His insistence that economic analysis cannot be separated from moral evaluation challenges the pretense of value-neutral investing. His framework provides what ESG often lacks: a coherent philosophical foundation explaining why ethics matter in economics. ESG investing now exceeds $30 trillion globally. This money moves based on principles al-Ghazali articulated before the First Crusade. The investors may not know his name, the fund managers may not cite his texts, but his framework shapes their decisions nonetheless. The critique of financialization extends his influence further. In 2016, Rana Foroohar published Makers and Takers, documenting how the American economy had shifted from producing goods and services to manipulating financial instruments. Wall Street extracted an ever-growing share of corporate profits while producing nothing tangible. Stock buybacks enriched shareholders while hollowing out productive capacity. Financial engineering replaced industrial engineering as the path to wealth. Her argument echoed al-Ghazali's 11th century warning. When money becomes a commodity traded for its own sake rather than a medium facilitating real exchange, the economy sickens. When clever people abandon productive work for financial manipulation, society loses what it needs most. When extraction replaces creation, collapse follows. Foroohar did not cite al-Ghazali. She may never have heard of him. But she reinvented his diagnosis for a contemporary audience, demonstrating how durable his insights remain. The same applies to modern monetary theory debates. MMT economists argue money is a social construct created by governments, not a natural resource discovered in the ground. Money has no intrinsic value. Its value comes from the social and legal structures that give it meaning. Governments with sovereign currencies can never run out of money in the way households can, because governments create money rather than earn it. These arguments, controversial in contemporary economics, restate what al-Ghazali documented 9 centuries ago. Money has no value in itself. It exists as a social convention. It functions as a mirror reflecting other goods rather than a good in itself. MMT's most radical claims are al-Ghazali's baseline assumptions. Mark Carney, former governor of both the Bank of Canada and the Bank of England, published Values in 2021. The book argued contemporary economics has lost its connection to moral philosophy, treating efficiency as the only criterion while ignoring justice, sustainability, and human dignity. Carney called for reintegrating ethical considerations into economic thinking. Al-Ghazali never separated them in the first place. His framework began from theology and moved to economics, not the other way around. He asked what kind of economy produces spiritually healthy human beings before asking what kind of economy maximizes output. He treated moral evaluation as prior to economic analysis, not an optional addition. The post-2008 questioning of whether markets should serve society rather than dominating it resurrects debates he addressed directly. His answers remain available to anyone willing to read them. You have now encountered an economist who predates Adam Smith by 6.5 centuries, whose monetary theory anticipated modern debates by 900 years, whose ethical framework shapes a $4 trillion industry, whose insights echo through critiques of financialization, ESG investing, and monetary policy debates you see in headlines today. You have also encountered a systematic erasure. The machinery of Western academic economics removed this thinker from your education. The incentives of colonial ideology, disciplinary gatekeeping, and Eurocentric historiography align to concentrate credit in European hands while extracting contributions from the rest of the world. This erasure continues. Most economics curricula still begin with Smith or the physiocrats. Most surveys of economic thought skip from ancient Greece to medieval scholastics to Enlightenment thinkers, as if the Islamic world produced nothing worth studying between Rome, In's fall, and Europe's rise. The manuscripts remain in libraries across 3 continents. The translations sit on university shelves. The scholarship documenting al-Ghazali's priority accumulates year by year. Yet public awareness lags far behind scholarly knowledge. Consider what his framework offers to contemporary problems. The debate over cryptocurrency revolves around whether Bitcoin and its successors represent real money or speculative instruments. Al-Ghazali's analysis clarifies the question. Does cryptocurrency facilitate exchange of real goods and services, or does it primarily exist as a thing traded for its own sake, generating returns disconnected from productive activity? His framework distinguishes medium from commodity, circulation from hoarding, facilitation from extraction. Apply his categories and the evaluation follows. The debate over stock buybacks similarly clarifies through his lens. When corporations use profits to purchase their own shares, inflating stock prices and rewarding executives with equity compensation, are they engaging in productive investment or financial manipulation? Al-Ghazali's concern about treating money as a commodity rather than a medium applies directly. Buybacks create no new products, employ no new workers, and build no new capacity. They transfer value from the corporation to current shareholders while producing nothing. His framework explains why critics find them problematic even when they are legal. The debate over zero interest rate policies pursued by central banks for over a decade gains new dimension through his analysis. If money naturally earns no return because money has no intrinsic productive capacity, what does it mean when central banks force interest rates below their natural level? Al-Ghazali would recognize the underlying question. Rates are artificial in either direction because money itself cannot produce value. The entire edifice of interest-based finance rests on a conceptual error he identified 900 years ago. The debate over billionaire wealth accumulation echoes his condemnation of hoarding. When individuals accumulate more money than they could spend in 1,000 lifetimes, have they imprisoned the judge? Does wealth concentrated to this degree still function as a medium of exchange, or has it transformed into a commodity hoarded for its own sake? His framework suggests the question matters beyond envy or fairness. Hoarding on a civilizational scale breaks the machinery of exchange itself. His integration of ethics with economics offers something contemporary thought desperately needs. Since the mid-20th century, mainstream economics has attempted to present itself as a positive science, describing what is without evaluating what ought to be. Price theory, game theory, and econometrics claim objectivity by excluding moral judgment. Al-Ghazali recognized this separation as impossible and dishonest. Every economic system embeds moral assumptions. Every policy choice reflects ethical priorities. Pretending otherwise simply hides the values driving decisions. His framework makes the values explicit, subjecting them to examination rather than concealing them beneath mathematical notation. His authority matters here. Presenting economic ethics as religious doctrine risks dismissal by secular audiences. Presenting identical ethics as the framework of a major global industry changes the calculation. Islamic finance is not a fringe movement. It serves nearly 2 billion people. It manages trillions of dollars. It operates major banks, issues billions in bonds, and shapes investment flows across the global economy. This industry runs on al-Ghazali's principles, not as historical inspiration, but as operational guidance. His categories determine what transactions are permissible. His analysis shapes how products are structured. His authority settles disputes among practitioners. And his framework predates the European economic tradition your education presented as foundational. The implications extend beyond economics into the structure of knowledge itself. If Islamic thinkers developed sophisticated economic theory centuries before Europeans, what other contributions has Western historiography suppressed? How many other intellectual debts remain unacknowledged? How much of what you learned as the Western achievement of civilization was actually borrowed, translated, or stolen from societies your education taught you to dismiss? Al-Ghazali serves as a single example in a much larger pattern. Mathematics, medicine, astronomy, chemistry, philosophy, architecture, literature. The Islamic Golden Age produced advances in every field, transmitted many to Europe through translation and trade, and then watched Europeans claim credit while colonizing the lands where the ideas originated. This pattern repeats across colonized regions. Indigenous knowledge systems, African contributions, Asian innovations. The machinery of Western academic authority has systematically extracted value from the intellectual production of the rest of the world while engineering bottlenecks that prevent recognition flowing back. Al-Ghazali's economic theory is one ledger entry in a much larger accounting, but it is a documented entry, verifiable, preserved in manuscripts you can examine yourself, analyzed by scholars whose citations you can check, no longer hidden if you know where to look. You found noob historian, now you know where to look. The story of al-Ghazali does not end with his death in 1111 CE. It continues in every Islamic finance transaction closed today. In every ESG fund screening investments for ethical impact, in every critique of Wall Street's extraction from the productive economy, in every debate about what money is and what it should do, his framework persists because it addresses enduring questions. His answers remain relevant because human economies still face the same temptations he identified: the desire to profit from money itself rather than productive work, the tendency to hoard rather than circulate, the inclination to separate economic analysis from moral judgment. Adam Smith published The Wealth of Nations in 1776. The book transformed economic thinking and launched a discipline. Abu Hamid al-Ghazali published the Ihya Ulum al-Din in 1106. The book anticipated that transformation by centuries and remains more widely read than Smith across much of the world today. One of these thinkers appears in your textbooks. The other built the framework your textbooks borrowed without attribution. The manuscripts remain, the translations exist, the scholarship accumulates. The truth waits for those willing to find it. Your education gave you a partial ledger. The debts were hidden. The credits were reassigned. The books were cooked to favor one civilization over another. Now you hold a fuller accounting. What you do with it determines whether al-Ghazali's ideas continue their work, or whether the next generation inherits the same erasure you received. The judge awaits your verdict.